The global landscape is undergoing a significant shift, with America's international standing no longer as prominent as it once was. Former allies are increasingly keeping Washington at arm's length, while economic and political tensions are escalating. The United States is experiencing unprecedented pushback, prompting the question, which countries are driving this newfound resistance? Driven by military conflicts, economic disagreements, or long-standing geopolitical grievances, these nations are creating distance between themselves and the US, potentially reshaping the global order in the process. Get ready for a surprise as we dive into this list. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe, like, and tap the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Number 1. Brazil. Brazil's relationship with the United States has been complex for decades, oscillating between strategic alliance and vehement opposition. But by 2025, it has reached a notable low point. During President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's ongoing tenure, Brazil has strengthened its alliances with China and Russia, directly challenging US dominance in Latin America. The country's trade policies have shifted towards favoring BRICS nations, with over 30% of its international trade now conducted in Chinese yuan, rather than the US dollar. Furthermore, Washington's imposition of sanctions on Brazil's major agricultural exports, such as soybeans and beef, has exacerbated tensions and fueled anti-US sentiment. The final straws came when Brazil recently rejected a US military cooperation agreement, opting to strengthen its defense ties with Moscow instead. Data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute shows that Brazil's arms imports from Russia surged by 45% in just a 2-year period. In Brazil, public perception is undergoing a significant transformation. According to a 2025 Pew Research poll, the percentage of Brazilians who view the US favorably has plummeted to 34%, down from 52% in 2020. As anti-American sentiment intensifies and the country's economy undergoes realignment, Brazil is assertively forging its own distinct path. Number 2. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, once a staunch ally of the United States in the Middle East, has been gradually distancing itself from American influence, with a key point of contention being oil, as the country seeks to break free from US economic dominance and forge stronger relationships with China and Russia instead. In a move set to shake the foundations of American financial power, Saudi Arabia revealed plans in early 2025 to start pricing a substantial portion of its oil exports in Chinese yuan rather than the traditional US dollar. This shift directly challenges the long-standing petrodollar system, which has been a cornerstone of US financial dominance for decades. The announcement comes on the heels of a significant increase in Saudi oil exports to China, reaching a record 2 million barrels per day, while simultaneously experiencing a 40% decline in exports to the US over the past 5 years. Furthermore, the US has found itself increasingly at odds with Saudi Arabia, particularly with regards to military concerns, adding another layer of tension to their already complex relationship. The Biden administration's move to halt certain arms sales to Saudi Arabia over human rights concerns was met with retaliation, as the kingdom sealed a major $15 billion defense agreement with Russia, signaling a notable realignment of its global alliances. Additionally, Saudi Arabia has been strengthening ties with the BRICS nations, culminating in its formal membership to the bloc in 2024. It's evident that Saudi Arabia has stopped seeking approval from Washington, given its recent actions. Number 3. Turkey. Turkey is a country that has had a long and complicated history with the United States, with 2025 potentially marking a pivotal turning point in their tumultuous relationship. Turkey, once a bastion of veteran influence in the Middle East, as a NATO member, is now forging its own path under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's increasingly autonomous foreign policy. A significant strain on US-Turkey relations was triggered by Ankara's move to acquire Russia's S-400 missile defense systems in 2025, despite Washington's persistent warnings, marking a notable shift away from traditional alliances. The United States retaliated with additional sanctions, exacerbating the already strained relationship. Meanwhile, Turkey has been bolstering its economic connections with China, with bilateral trade exceeding $50 billion per year. Furthermore, Turkey has shown interest in joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a Beijing and Moscow-led security alliance, marking a significant shift away from its traditional Western alliances. Tensions are escalating further, fueled by growing anti-American sentiment in Turkey. According to a 2025 survey by Metropol, a staggering 68% of Turkish citizens view the US as a threat to their national security. As Turkey undergoes significant economic and military shifts, it appears to be distancing itself from Washington, hinting that its future may lie elsewhere. Number 4. South Africa. South Africa's relationship with the US has historically been distant, but 2025 is set to be a turning point as the country shifts its allegiances. As a prominent member of the BRICS nations, South Africa is pushing back against what it sees as Western economic supremacy, drawing closer to China and Russia in the process. In a significant move, the South African government has defied US sanctions on Russia, opting instead to strengthen its economic and military ties with Moscow, marking a notable divergence from its previous stance. In 2025, South Africa and Russia's bilateral trade reached a record high of over $3.5 billion. However, this development coincided with escalating tensions between South Africa and the United States, as Washington's efforts to influence Pretoria's stance on African issues in line with Western-backed policies were met with resistance. South Africa has been vocal in its criticism of US military intervention in Africa, characterizing it as a form of neo-colonialism. Protests against the US have intensified in South Africa, with large demonstrations taking place in Cape Town and Johannesburg, driven by opposition to American foreign policies. A 2025 Ipsos poll reveals a significant decline in the US's popularity, with only 27% of South Africans viewing the country favorably. This shift signals a clear message. South Africa is forging its own path, one that increasingly distances itself from Washington's influence. Number 5. Mexico. For decades, Mexico and the US have navigated a complex and intertwined relationship. But by 2025, escalating economic disputes, heightened immigration tensions, and deepening political disagreements have prompted Mexico to reassess its position regarding its northern neighbor, with trade emerging as the most significant point of contention. Mexico has undergone significant diversification of its trade partnerships in recent years, shifting its focus away from the US towards strengthening relationships with China and other Latin American economies. A notable milestone was reached in 2025 when China surpassed the US to become Mexico's largest trading partner, with annual trade volumes exceeding $130 billion. In contrast, the US has maintained a tough stance on border security, introducing stricter measures that have put a strain on diplomatic relations between the two countries. Mexico's government, led by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has retaliated against Washington's approach, which it deems hostile and unacceptable. Adding to the strain, Mexico's recent move to involve Russian and Chinese companies in energy infrastructure projects, an area traditionally controlled by US firms, has intensified tensions. As a result, it is becoming increasingly apparent that Mexico is seeking to diversify its economic and political alliances, looking beyond its relationship with the US for future partnerships. Number 6. India. India's long-standing strategic partnership with the US, founded on shared concerns about China's growing influence, is starting to show signs of strain by 2025. As India aims to establish itself as a major global player, it is increasingly seeking to assert its independence. A key indicator of this shift is India's deepening involvement with the BRICS alliance, where it is taking a leading role in developing alternative financial systems to rival those of the West. In 2025, India strengthened its economic ties with Russia by increasing oil imports, defying US sanctions. As a result, bilateral trade between the two nations reached a record $50 billion, sparking concern in Washington. Furthermore, India's arms deals have also been a point of contention with the US. Despite US efforts to reduce India's dependence on Russian military equipment, India has strengthened its defense partnership with Moscow, inking a $7 billion agreement for cutting-edge fighter jets and missile systems. This move has strained relations between New Delhi and Washington. Furthermore, India has pushed back against US pressure to ban Chinese tech giant Huawei from its 5G network infrastructure, instead opting to maintain its own stance on the issue. India has adopted a practical strategy, permitting Huawei to maintain its operations in the country while concurrently fostering the growth of its domestic technology sector, a decision that has sparked concern in Washington over potential security threats and is also influencing a shift in public opinion within India. A Pew Research poll conducted in 2025 revealed that a mere 42% of Indians hold a favorable view of the US, marking a decline from 55% in 2020. As India adopts a more autonomous approach to foreign policy, its readiness to support US interests is becoming increasingly uncertain. Number 7. Germany. This shift is particularly notable in contrast to traditional US allies like Germany, which has historically maintained a strong alliance with the US in Europe. By 2025, the relationship between Berlin and Washington has become increasingly tense, with a key factor being their diverging energy and economic policies, which have been exacerbated by the impact of Western sanctions that have taken a significant toll on Germany, already grappling with soaring energy costs. Germany has restarted limited energy imports from Russia despite US opposition, prioritizing economic stability over diplomatic unity, which has led to heightened tensions with Washington and further exacerbated by Germany's criticisms of the US's increasingly protectionist trade policies. The US Inflation Reduction Act has sparked controversy in Berlin, as German officials claim it unfairly subsidizes American-made products, thereby undermining European industries. Meanwhile, Germany is pursuing greater defense autonomy for Europe, aiming to decrease its dependence on NATO, which is predominantly funded by the US. As part of this effort, Germany has boosted funding for the EU's independent defense initiatives, marking a significant shift away from reliance on US-led security frameworks, a move that is expected to gain momentum by early 2025. Public sentiment has followed suit. A 2025 YouGov poll found that 60% of Germans believe the US exerts too much influence over European affairs, with many supporting a more independent EU foreign policy. As Germany prioritizes its own economic and security interests, its alignment with Washington is weakening. Number 8. Iran. Iran remains a fierce critic of the United States, and by 2025, tensions between Tehran and Washington have reached a fever pitch, fueled in part by Iran's increasing military collaborations with Russia and China. In 2025, Iran sealed a landmark $10 billion arms agreement with Russia, acquiring state-of-the-art fighter jets and sophisticated missile defense systems, sparking heightened anxiety in Washington over the nation's expanding regional clout. Furthermore, Iran has strengthened its alliance with China through a sweeping 25-year strategic partnership, which encompasses substantial investments in the country's infrastructure development and oil production sectors. Iran's reliance on Western markets has decreased significantly, as China now receives almost 40% of its oil exports. However, tensions remain high over the nuclear issue, which continues to be a major point of contention. This was evident in 2025, when negotiations over Iran's nuclear program broke down, with Tehran explicitly refusing to accept US-imposed restrictions on its nuclear activities. The US retaliation came in the form of new sanctions, but this has not deterred Iran from further developing its nuclear program, prompting alarm among international security experts. Meanwhile, anti-American sentiment in Iran has reached unprecedented levels, with state-sponsored protests regularly condemning US policies. A 2025 Gallup poll revealed that a staggering 85% of Iranians perceive the US as a hostile nation. Iran's alliances with Russia and China are growing stronger, and its stance against the US remains unshakable. Number 9. Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's rivalry with the US has escalated significantly by 2025, particularly since the Ukraine invasion, which has sent Moscow-Washington relations plummeting to levels reminiscent of the Cold War era, with Russia now openly vying to counter US global dominance. Russia has economically countered Western sanctions by strengthening trade ties with China, India, and other BRICS countries. Notably, in 2025, Russia and China introduced a new financial framework aimed at circumventing the US-dominated SWIFT banking system, thereby decreasing dependence on the US dollar and substantially diminishing Washington's economic influence. Russia is bolstering its global military footprint, as evidenced by its strengthened alliances with nations such as Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela. to whom it is providing cutting-edge weaponry and defense technology. According to US intelligence, Russia is also expanding its military bases in Africa and Latin America, a development that is sparking concern in Washington. In Russia, public opinion is strongly opposed to the United States, with state-controlled media depicting America as the primary driver of global unrest. A recent survey by the Levada Center in 2025 revealed that a staggering 90% of Russians think the US is intentionally trying to undermine their nation. As Moscow continues to challenge American influence globally, Russia stands as one of the most significant adversaries to the United States. Number 10, China. China is at the forefront of the challenge to US influence, with tensions between Beijing and Washington reaching a historic peak in 2025. The rivalry is playing out on multiple fronts, including economically, where China is making a concerted effort to supplant the US dollar as the global reserve currency. The United Nations has surpassed the US dollar in multiple global trade agreements, with significant economies such as Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Russia now using the Chinese currency for transactions. China's introduction of a digital yuan initiative in 2025 has also hastened the decline of the dollar. Meanwhile, China's military presence has been expanding in the South China Sea, marked by the construction of new military bases and intensified naval patrols. The situation surrounding Taiwan has escalated to a critical level, with Beijing issuing a stern warning to Washington to halt further arms sales to the island, prompting the US to bolster its military presence in the Pacific, thereby increasing the likelihood of a direct confrontation. Meanwhile, China is making significant strides in surpassing the US technologically, gaining a competitive edge in crucial fields such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and next-generation 6G telecommunications. US sanctions on Chinese tech giants such as Huawei and Alibaba have had little impact, as these companies continue to flourish and broaden their reach in global markets. In China, a growing sense of nationalism is taking hold, fueled by state propaganda that stresses the importance of countering American influence. A recent survey by the Global Times, looking ahead to 2025, revealed that a staggering 88% of Chinese citizens are convinced that the US is deliberately attempting to undermine China's growing prominence. As China's economic, military, and technological influence continues to expand, it is increasingly asserting itself as a global superpower, shifting its stance against the US. For travelers planning to visit countries with anti-American sentiments, here are 5 useful tips to keep in mind. Starting with the importance of understanding and respecting local customs and etiquette. To navigate foreign interactions successfully, it's essential to understand the local cultural norms, greetings, and behaviors, as this knowledge can help prevent unintentional offense and foster more positive relationships. Additionally, refraining from discussing politics is advisable, given that many countries hold strong views on certain policies, and avoiding such debates can help mitigate potential tensions. To minimize your impact as a tourist, it's essential to blend in and show respect for local customs. This can be achieved by dressing modestly, refraining from loud behavior, and being mindful of local traditions, which in turn helps you avoid drawing unwanted attention to yourself. Additionally, exercising caution when it comes to safety and being aware of potential scams is crucial. In areas where anti-American sentiment is prevalent, it's crucial to remain vigilant in public and avoid confrontations to ensure safety. Instead, tap into the local culture by being respectful and open-minded, as the kindness and genuine interest you show in their customs can often lead to warm and positive interactions, despite initial impressions of unfriendliness. The world is undergoing a significant transformation, with America's position of power facing substantial threats. As nations increasingly move away from alignment with the US, the global balance of power is being reshaped, potentially leading to a new era in international politics. Looking ahead, a major geopolitical shift may be on the horizon, with the possibility of novel alliances forming that could drastically alter the global landscape. Share your perspectives on this in the comments below. And be sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for additional analysis and insights.